and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome and introduce Dr. Robert Murphy, Executive Director of the Institute for Global Health and the John Philip Fair Professor of Infectious Diseases here at Northwestern Steinberg School of Medicine, who answers your COVID questions here on our Facebook page each Tuesday and Thursday. And we invite you to continue to submit your questions to us each week via Facebook at NU Institute for Global Health, where the videos are posted, or by email at globalhealthinstitute@northwestern.edu. And leading the discussion again today is Katie Berg, who is an intern this summer with the Institute. So Katie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you, Dr. Murphy, for being here to answer the questions. And of course, thank you to our viewers who continue to submit questions every week. We really appreciate it. Starting off today, we had some very, very big news yesterday from several news outlets regarding the FDA's decision to very soon authorize an additional dose for immunocompromised patients. Dr. Murphy, can we have your reaction?
Yeah, no, this is long awaited. It's the same thing that has happened in Israel, France, the Netherlands, Germany. And now today, we expect the FDA to approve the third shot or booster, call it what you want, for immunocompromised patients. The details will be out later today, so it'll be all over the news media. But it is definitely warranted because we know many of the immunocompromised patients were excluded from the original trials. And so the dosing that's approved today in the United States and the world is really based on relatively healthy people taking the vaccine. So if you now, with the vaccine approved, we find that many of the immunocompromised patients, like a patient who has a kidney transplant, somebody with leukemia or chronic lymphoma, other immunocompromising conditions, we know that a lot of those people don't mount a very good immunologic response, and some preliminary studies that have been done in small numbers of those patients have shown that they do respond to an additional dose, and maybe even more than one dose. That remains to be seen. So this is a great advance, and now because the government owns all the vaccines, it will be allowed that physicians can order, and that the sites that are giving the vaccines can give a third dose to these people.
Wow, it's certainly really great news to hear, especially for a more vulnerable population. Speaking of another vulnerable population, which is our school children, the state of California has become the first state in the US to mandate vaccines or weekly testing for teachers. Do you expect to see more states requiring teachers to be vaccinated?
I think the states and healthcare authorities around the United States are going to be mandating vaccines or frequent testing in a variety of different situations: companies, schools, universities, government, the military. All this is happening, and it's going to increase in number because the companies can't function with a big chunk of their workforce leaving, getting sick, infecting other people in the company. It's just not going to work. And the companies are moving to the front, and they're doing the mandate, and not just companies, but school districts and the like. Right.
And is it safe for women who are pregnant or are going to become pregnant to now get the vaccine?
Yes. I mean, this has been talked about for a couple months. And there's data, and most of the data actually is in healthcare workers who became pregnant when they first got vaccinated. So the data, 170 or 80 million people have taken the vaccine so far, and it's safe. Plenty of those women were pregnant at all different stages of pregnancy, and there has been no adverse effects. Matter of fact, no adverse effects to the vaccine. And we know that if they do get COVID, there are plenty of adverse effects. So the risk-benefit ratio definitely favors taking the vaccine, pregnant.
And speaking of taking the vaccines, do you know how much vaccination rates are increasing over the US, or if they still are?
Well, there's been a slight uptick recently in people, mostly in these under-vaccinated counties and states. And we're going to see a couple big boosts now that for a couple reasons. One is that the full FDA approval is happening very soon, and I think that's going to help a lot of people. The military is the largest employer in the United States, and they were going to mandate it for all military people. And then you've got all these companies, one after the other, mandating vaccination. That's all being held up in the courts as being legal. And so you're going to see vaccine uptick a little bit in some of these hesitant people because of those three reasons.
Right. Okay. Switching over to some of our viewer questions for the week. Thank you again for submitting them. The first comes from a viewer and their spouse who are traveling to Florida to visit their in-laws next week. And they would like to know if it is safe for them to travel to Florida with their 14-month-old child who obviously cannot yet get vaccinated or wear a mask.
Unfortunately, there is a very, very serious outbreak of COVID in Florida right now, higher than at any other time in the history of the pandemic. It's really not safe to go to Florida now for anybody.
Mm-hmm. Especially those who are unvaccinated.
Everyone.
Okay, yeah, great. So another viewer who is immunocompromised, great news, the booster is going to become available, an additional dose soon, but they would like to know if they should receive, they got the J&J initially, if they should receive the same type of vaccine or if there's a different vaccine type they should take, and if an additional dose could possibly overstimulate their immune system and have adverse effects.
No, I think what will happen is most people will take the mRNA vaccine as this third shot. So this will be Pfizer or Moderna. I don't think they'll be giving the J&J shot until the study that Johnson & Johnson is doing, looking at 2 shots. So I think, and we'll see what the FDA says today in their guidance. So I would defer to that as to what vaccine to take until that comes out. But it's probably going to be the mRNA vaccines as the third shot.
Mm-hmm. And will the doses be the same? Will it be like the same vial basically that you're getting that from for the third?
Right, the doses are going to be exactly the same in this round. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Another viewer is wondering whether their 11, soon to be 12-year-old child could go on a trip to Great America with a group of friends. There's one other child who is unvaccinated, but the others all are.
It's probably not a good idea right now, just because of the level of infections that are going on. I think, Great America's outside. That's a good thing. However, I think it's not a good place to go if you're unvaccinated at this particular time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me add to that though. Soon, they're going to approve 4 to 11 to be vaccinated. So, keep that in mind. All this is very dynamic, and that soon younger children can be vaccinated, and then it would be safe.
Mm-hmm. All right. We have a few more situational questions. The first of which being, is it safe for a vaccinated individual to attend a 50-guest outdoor event?
Yeah, I think the outdoor events, are just like before, particularly if everybody is vaccinated. This question comes up quite a bit. A lot of responsible people have been vaccinated. They're having weddings, they're having events, and having, it's summertime. I think we can do it outside. We can be safe. I think the concern would be if somebody had an active immunosuppressive condition. In other words, somebody with chronic lymphoma, somebody with leukemia, an organ transplant patient on immunosuppressive drugs, somebody on high dose steroids. I think it would be unwise for them to go. Right.
So a cancer patient that's considered cancer-free and has a normal white blood cell count would be more safe, especially if outside in a smaller group.
They're vaccinated, they're outside, and their cancer is completely under control. They're not on chemotherapy at the present time. Probably is okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would it be safe for an unvaccinated person to be unmasked outside if they are at least 20 feet away from other non-household members? And what about vaccinated people going to the movie theaters?
So an unvaccinated person is really at high risk for themselves and to give it, of course, to other people, including vaccinated people, they can give it to. So those people need to, when they're in a group of people that are vaccinated or non-vaccinated, need to wear a mask and socially distance 3 to 6 feet apart from those people.
Okay, and what about
you're going to movie theaters? Pretty much, you can wear a mask in a movie theater. and you can stay 3 feet away from somebody in a movie theater. If you're vaccinated, it's pretty safe.
So is there a test a physician or an oncologist could order to test the immune response to a COVID vaccine in a cancer patient?
This is a really great question. It comes up quite a bit. Unfortunately, there's no commercial test that I'm aware of that can answer that question. It's of intense interest, and there are groups looking at it. Right now, the tests are not standardized. They're different from one lab to another. One group can do a barrage of tests. They're not even commercially approved, so they can't even bill for them if they wanted to. You can't even order them. But it can be done in a research lab. So, I think what will happen, in the near future, like in months, some of these tests actually could be commercialized. I know groups are looking at this, but be very wary about ordering big, expensive panels of immunologic tests. They may not actually be giving you the answer that you want.
Okay, that's very good to know. So another person was wondering, there's a situation where 2 vaccinated individuals were in close contact with each other, and subject A, 48 hours after, came down with COVID symptoms. Subject B is now a week out following that possible exposure and is asymptomatic. Should the asymptomatic person get tested for COVID? And what are the latest guidelines for asymptomatic vaccinated people?
Well, for the vaccinated people that come in contact with somebody, now they have to assume that they could have gotten the infection. So they need to be tested after they either have to quarantine or they have to be tested approximately 4 days after the exposure, whether they have symptoms or not. So it goes back to kind of the way it was before. But we have to be a little bit careful with the guidelines here. The key thing with the vaccinated people is whether they're asymptomatic or symptomatic. Definitely symptomatic. The asymptomatic, I think, is still a little bit up in the air.
Mm-hmm. Another viewer has been feeling some cold symptoms come on, including a scratchy throat and what they described as a full head feeling, but they have not had any fever yet. Their symptoms have persisted for a few days, but not gotten worse, and they were wondering if COVID and Delta variant had similar symptoms and whether or not they should get tested for COVID.
They should definitely get tested with any kind of symptom. That's one thing. And the symptoms from Delta versus the other variants and viruses is the same.
Mm-hmm. Another viewer has a family history of dementia and neurodegenerative disease. They were wondering if any of the COVID vaccines have shown any evidence of bringing out neurodegenerative diseases or dementia in someone who is not currently diagnosed.
No, they haven't. That's clear. Matter of fact, weirdly, in people who have some neurocognitive problems from COVID, some of them anecdotally have been reported to improve when they get the vaccine. Just anecdotal. So, take it with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that the Moderna vaccine is showing greater long-term efficacy than the Pfizer vaccine?
Not yet, and they're very similar vaccines. So I would imagine they're going to pretty much go in parallel with each other, but we'll see what the data shows.
All right. And will the Novavax vaccine be approved for use in the United States?
Well, they've applied for their EUA, so we will hear when all that data is reported. It's a different kind of vaccine than the other vaccines that are out there. They've gone through all the clinical trials just like everybody else. Their preliminary data they presented publicly looks totally acceptable. And I don't see why they're not going to get EUA approval here in the United States.
That's great. Is it a 1-dose or a 2-dose vaccine?
2-dose vaccine.
Okay.
It's a synthetic protein subunit with the adjuvant. So it's a different mechanism. It's not a viral vector and it's not mRNA.
Mm-hmm. Our final question today comes from a viewer who was wondering if they have to wait a certain amount of time following their second dose of the COVID vaccine to receive their flu shot.
There's no magic number, but people are generally waiting about 2 weeks. When, first of all the symptoms from the vaccine itself need to be completely gone. And then sometime after that, you can take the flu shot. Typically, people are waiting 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Murphy, for answering our questions. And thank you so much to the viewers for continually submitting them. We really appreciate it. And I hope that you have a great day.
Great. Thank you.